So we have live from Tennessee, Representative Tim Burchett, who's kind enough to chime in and spend some time with us. I recently went to Washington, D.C. and spent 45 minutes in the House of Representatives office building having a very candid and open conversation about UFO secrecy. Tim is one of the, if not he is the most outstanding outspoken member of Congress on this topic. He has a personal affinity for the topic, and he also knows how bad it is. And when we sat in his office, we got down to the nitty-gritty. We talked about the Wright-Patterson and the Roswell and where the bodies are buried and who you should ask. And Tim's a fan and a true supporter. And it was a privilege to meet him then. You might wonder why I'm not calling him Mr. Burchett. It's because he told me to call him Tim, and that's the kind of guy he is. So anyway, he's got some statements for us, some things he'd like to say. He's a big fan of MUFON. And then afterwards, I'll be able to you'll have to come up and we'll see how many questions we can get in. You'll have to ask me, and then I'll ask him for audio reasons. But Tim, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you all for having me. As you said, I'm Tim Burchett. You can probably tell from my accent, I'm from East Tennessee, as I like to say, the only place in America where people don't speak with an accent. And so I appreciate y'all having me. I'm going to go through a few notes that I had some folks prepare for me, and then and I'll stop and answer questions, and I promise you they're all fair. I was, when I first was elected to the state legislature years ago, I was in a little classroom in a place called West High School, and this little girl raised her hand and asked me a question, and because they had prepared questions, and then I told the teacher, I said, let them just ask the questions. And this one little girl raised her hand and said, are you single? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, my mama's going through a divorce, and you seem like a nice guy, and I was wondering if you would maybe think about taking her out. And the teacher looked at me with this horrified look, and I kind of waved her off, and I said, well, if you can get me an 8x10 glossy and a copy of her last W-2, we'll talk about it. And then, of course, she never produced either one of those, so I never did get a date out of that deal. But I promise you, all the questions are fair. And thanks again, MUFON, good folks, for having me on. Many years America's been fascinated by the unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs. I don't really like that. I'm a UFO guy. That's what I like. And I think the aliens and all these worldly creatures have dominated our sci-fi and movies for decades. And folks have come up with fiction and nonfiction stories, books, movies, documentaries, and other content that all ask the simple question, what's really out there? And although our culture has been fascinated by the possibility of alien life beyond our own planet, our government has stayed noticeably quiet on the subject until recently. And our federal government is now becoming more vocal on this subject. I'm part of it. So, and taking more action to address the many reports coming from members of our military about UAP encounters or UFO encounters. Our federal government should absolutely become more open and transparent what they know about UFOs. And of course, I strongly support that. However, it seems to me that our federal government is merely attempting to appear transparent about this without actually providing useful information about what they really know. Instead of giving us helpful information or useful information, they're pumping out useless reports and bogus hearings, and they're doing little to destigmatize the UFO incident reporting process in our military. I don't think that's good enough for the American people. It's not good enough for Tim Burchett. And we deserve to know that our elected and non-elected leaders, what we know about these UFOs. And let's go through some of our federal government's involvement with UFOs and how they handle the information over the years, at least to the best of our limited knowledge. The federal government has been quietly gathering information on UFOs for decades. We know that. Back in '47, they, of course, started conducting that investigated about 12,000 UFO sightings. And most of those incidents had natural explanations like stars, spy planes, clouds, balloons. But 701 of those incidents remained unexplained by the time the studies were shut down in '69. In 2007, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, government's always big with these long names. I don't know why they do it. I think they just give somebody a job to figure out all this stuff. And it was established to investigate reports of the UFOs. However, the program remained mostly in the shadows, avoiding unwanted attention. And the Pentagon even claimed the program was shut down in 2012, which was partly true and partly false. Government never tells the full story. It's true the program ran out of funding in 2012 officially, but officials in the program did not complete, of course, they didn't completely stop investigating reports of the UFOs after that point. They just investigated those reports in addition to other defense duties. And in June of 21, the Pentagon released an unclassified report that was supposed to clear up our questions about UFOs, but as I've stated many times, it was totally bogus. I could have drawn up this report in the 5th grade for all the information it gave us. It raised more questions than answers about the unidentified objects in the skies. Of the 144 reported encounters between 2004 and 2021, we got an explanation about one, just one. Officials said they had high confidence that one of these encounters was just a deflating balloon. That leaves 143, by my math, other encounters that were not addressed in this report. Recently, during the congressional hearing in May, this number of possible UFO encounters between 2004 and 2021 also rose from 144 to approximately 400. 18 of those reportedly maneuvered in ways that seemed to defy known aerodynamics. And I've talked to some of the Navy pilots, best in the world, that were in the air at the same time. And they, in fact, stated that to me, that this is just defied everything that they knew about aerodynamics. And this declassified version report didn't confirm or deny anything else except that these encounters were things that physically exist. Now, that's not exactly super helpful. I don't believe the folks at the Pentagon who published this report are bad people, and I don't believe they put this bogus report out on purpose. I believe it's a lot of those folks wanted to put out a report with some serious information, but somebody at the top pulled back all the information important to us, and that made them put this unhelpful report because they weren't allowed to publish any information of value. Because you remember they talked real big about it, and then they pulled it back. I mean, they were supposed to release it, and then they didn't. And then the report they put out later was just so full of holes. And in November of 2021, the U.S. Department of Defense announced it was starting a new office to collect information on these unidentified objects in the skies. It was called the Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group, another mouthful. And you can tell this group was made up by a government bureaucrat because they gave this department a 20-syllable name when it is essentially a UAP or UFO department. I trust the folks in the department to do their jobs to the best of their ability. However, when this department was first created, I said I didn't trust this department to be transparent with lawmakers or the public about what it had found. So far, I have not been proven wrong, unfortunately. I've heard very little information coming out of the department 9 months later. And on May 17th, 2022, the U.S. House Intelligence Committee held a hearing on the existence of UAPs. And as I stated afterwards, I was the only House member that was there that was not on the committee. They didn't have the full committee there. They didn't ask the right questions. And a reporter came to me as I was walking out and said, "What did you think?" And I stated, "We got hosed." Immediately the cameras turned to me, and then that's part of the reason I'm here today. They split the hearing into two parts: a classified hearing that even I wasn't allowed into at a public hearing. I was told I was going to be able to ask questions during the public hearing, which then, when it got close to my time to speak, I was told, in fact, I received a text that said, no, in fact, I was not going to be able to speak, and if I wanted to forward them questions, they would get them. And when they diluted my question down so much, it was very disappointing. Of course, I was disappointed to see, of course, that I was the only member of Congress there who went to the hearing. It was not on the House Intelligence Committee. And they were the ones conducting the hearing. I was originally told that I was going to ask questions, of course, but I wasn't allowed to. And the officials that were testifying, I felt like had very little knowledge they could actually give to the members of the committee. Most of the answers were on the line of, I don't know, or we don't have the data on that, or that data is classified. They could have and should have had much more helpful witnesses testify that day. There was a Navy pilot in the hearing room who reported one of those encounters. He could have personally testified to the committee what he saw. He wasn't allowed to. At one point during the hearing, one of my colleagues, Congressman Mike Gallagher, a Republican member who was once an officer in the Marine Corps, asked one of the witnesses a very simple question about the Maelstrom incident, which, if you know anything about UFOs, you know something about that, or about the phenomena. If he had would comment on anything about the report, and he said, and you all know that this was an incident that happened in 1967 at the Air Force Base in Montana, where 10 nuclear intercontinental ballistic missiles were reportedly shut down without an explanation. Moments after soldiers at the base reported seeing an unidentified object in the sky over the base that looks like a glowing red orb. In response to Congressman Gallagher's question, Scott Bray, the Deputy Director of Navy Intelligence, simply said, "That data is not with the holdings of the UAP task force." That was his quote. Now, as I'm sure you all know, the Maelstrom incident has been publicly discussed, and you can find by entering that name in the internet search engine. It's public information, but this witness still couldn't give a straight answer about them. The Maelstrom incident is a widely debated event. Some say it's definitive proof of UAPs and alien life, and others say it didn't even happen. And regardless of whether you believe this story or not, our lawmakers and the American people deserve to hear the witness's testimony and get to the truth. During their entire hearing, the witnesses didn't even bring up one of the most famous and compelling videos that are accessible to the public. It was on 60 Minutes, the Tic Tac video. Shows a possible UAP encounter that was taken from a Navy fighter jet in 2004 using advanced infrared technology. In 2004, the footage from the aircraft USS Nimitz was taken during a routine training mission off the Southern California coast. One of the Navy pilots aboard the aircraft reported seeing unusual churning of the ocean surface before seeing a white object that looked like a large Tic Tac flying at incredibly high speed over the water. The pilots reported the object seemed to lack any visible flight control surfaces or means of propulsion. One of these pilots, retired U.S. Navy Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich, said she didn't know what it was and it could absolutely have been human activity, but she did say it was behaving weirdly, and she and her fellow pilots couldn't recognize it. The U.S. Navy confirmed this is authentic, and now it's one of the most famous UAP encounter videos we have. So why is it brought up at the congressional hearing? Where we are supposedly trying to get to the truth. And during that, this isn't in my notes, but one thing that really ticked me off that showed me that we got hosed was we have the most advanced technology in the country, yet they show a video of that was taken inside the canopy of a jet airplane, and the guy used his freaking iPhone to record it. And yet, and they said, and Adam Schiff, who politically I don't agree with much, we're actually friends, believe it or not, but he asked a really great question. He said, "What exactly am I looking at here?" And then he went to try to and most advanced technology in the world, and we can't even freeze a frame during a 1.5-minute video to show him what they were doing, because everybody was looking at the glare on the inside the canopy, and they weren't looking at the little dot that was flying by, that to me didn't show a whole heck of a lot. And I was that really ticked me off, and it should the American public. The American public can't be content with this kind of non-information coming from our federal government. Our leaders can't get away with publishing reports void of any actual information and holding declassified hearings that tell us nothing, and they claim they're being transparent with the American people. I have a saying, and it applies to me as much to everybody. I think what they're doing is they're trying to run the clock out on us, because I, like the American public, I want my pizzas in 30 minutes or less, and dadgummit, that's about my attention span. And so we'll move on to something else. I know that the UFO believers and followers like myself and you all won't, but the average American will, and they'll move on to some other crisis. And it just shows why we don't trust our government. Again, I don't blame the lack of transparency on most of the folks at the Pentagon. I believe that those folks working in our Department of Defense are generally patriots who love their country and work hard every day to protect it. Unfortunately, I believe there are some at the top who are keeping information from leaving the Pentagon walls. I also believe there are some folks working within our Defense Department who have a vast wealth of knowledge beyond what the general public knows about UFOs, but they aren't allowed to share any of that information because of orders from the top. Other workers are extraordinarily limited in what they actually know. I believe our government is purposefully putting forward these kind of witnesses to answer our questions when the truth, they have no answer at all. They compartmentalize so much. In my backyard here is Oak Ridge National Laboratory. I don't actually represent the lab, but over 6,000 people that work there live in my congressional district. And it's amazing to me, when I was a younger man, my daddy fought in the Second World War, and my mama actually flew an airplane, and she'd lost a brother fighting the Nazis, so she wanted to do her part, and Dad was in the Pacific, in the Marine Corps fighting the Japanese. But and I would meet these folks that worked at Oak Ridge during the war, and they worked in their department. And I remember I knock on doors, that's how I get elected. And that's my main campaign strategy. And I would always meet these folks that worked at Oak Ridge, and they would say, I worked on the bomb. I said, really, what'd you do? And I said, well, at the time, I didn't know what I did. So, I mean, it's a different time. You can't have 5 people now and that keep a secret. But back then, you had hundreds, if not thousands, of patriotic Americans who were told not to talk, and they didn't talk. But these folks now, I believe they compartmentalize this knowledge so much that and people die off, and so we lose some of that institutional knowledge. And currently, I believe some of the people that they put before us, they put them before us intentionally, because if they were to take a lie detector test, they wouldn't know a UFO from or somebody shooting a Roman candle out of a trailer park. But during the May 17th hearing, Ronald Moultrie, the Undersecretary for Intelligence, the Department of Defense, said the U.S. Department of Defense is full of people who are just like the rest of the country. He said, we have our inquisitiveness, we have our questions. And if that's the case, the Department of Defense should share whatever answer it gets with the American people and the American public. This isn't just a government transparency issue. This is a national security issue. The American people have a right to know what those reported encounters are and what they really mean. What are these foreign objects our Navy pilots are seeing on a regular basis during their training exercise? I was told by a member of the committee, and they said, Burchett, I said, I can't even believe we're dealing with this. Well, we got so much more important issues. And I'm trying to think, what is more important when our top military pilots, the top pilots that in the world that we have in this country, flying multi-million-dollar aircraft, and we have something in our airspace that we're not controlling. And we've had, it depends on who you talk to, between 14 and 20 near misses with these aircraft in our airspace. To me, that is very important, and we should know. We got a right to know what these are, and our Navy pilots are correct. I don't personally believe that the objects they serve a threat to us. If they did, they'd have proven to be dangerous a long time ago. And obviously, it's not American, and it's not the Chinese, and it's not the Russians. If it was the Russians, as I've stated many times, I believe Putin, with his incredible ego, would land a UFO on the White House lawn and get out bare-chested, probably ride a bear over and wrestle Biden and get back in his UFO bare-chested and fly back to Russia. But regardless of where they're coming from, they are. I think they're correlated with national security issues such as deactivating our nuclear missiles. And the Maelstrom incident that was brought up is a perfect example. Robert Jameson, the U.S. Air Force nuclear missile targeting officer, reported several instances of needing to go out and restart missiles that had been deactivated after UFOs had been sighted in the area. In 2010, Robert Hastings, a UAP researcher, said 120 service members have all told him they had seen UFOs flying around nuclear and weapons grounds during their service. These accounts may all be true, they may all be false, or there may be an explanation that we haven't found yet, but we need to give members of the military the ability to easily report these kind of sightings to their superior officers, especially incidents that have significant impact on our weapons operations. I think it's a matter of safety to our pilots, our Navy pilots, and all the others. Our Navy pilots don't have all the information they need about these kinds of objects in the sky and what they encounter and when they encounter during the flights. And they need to know what to do when that happens. I think it's we need to provide them some sort of a blanket of protection, though, when they come forward with these sightings, and I don't believe our military provides that now. They may say they do, but if you talk to pilots, they'll tell you that there's a blemish on their record, they're chastised for it, and we don't need that, because that's going to keep them from coming forward, and they do that in the airlines as well. And we need to do something, and we need to find out what's going on before we do have a collision. And I think the answers are out there if we could just get the right people to reported them. I think How do we fix the problems with our government when they address these sightings? We need to release all the records the Pentagon has on this subject. No more classified hearings behind closed doors. No more bogus reports full of useless information. The federal government needs to be transparent with the American people about the sort of information we really have. And they need to bring in these members of the military report of these kinds of incidents to testify before Congress in an unclassified briefing for the American public to see. Former Air Force Captain Robert Salas, who was at the Malmstrom Air Force Base that day in 1967, said he hopes Congress calls him to testify about what he saw. Now, why in the world would we not be calling these people? Ryan Graves, a Navy pilot, who's a lieutenant, very outspoken about the sightings during training flights, was at the hearing in May, and he could have testified right then. I met the guy, yet he was not. He wasn't even was supposed to be even in the meeting. Apparently, he did, and so I think somebody in the press gave him a press credentials to get him in. And let's bring in some of those folks to testify before Congress instead of Pentagon officials with, at best, secondhand information, and at worst, no information at all, or at least no information they can share. We also need to get rid of the stigma, as I mentioned. And the Navy pilots who reported these incidents are American patriots, but they weren't treated as such. Many of the pilots, like I said, were made fun of and they were mocked. Colleagues dressed up like aliens and mocked them for reporting what they saw, and that's got to end, folks. It also needs to be a clear and normalized pathway for members of our military to report events like this without worrying, not fill out a bunch of crazy paperwork, but just a step-by-step clear process for reporting these events. In conclusion, you know, I was outside tonight. It's a little cloudy here in Knoxville where I live, but most nights I go out and I look out and I look at God's vast universe, and I think, you know, and I look at the stars, and the light from those stars left there, some of them, before the time of Christ. I mean, the vastness of God's universe is just incredible. And, you know, he created all that in his infinite wisdom. I believe he's, you know, I'm a Christian. I'm not here to try to save any souls, but, you know, I read my Bible, and I read about Ezekiel seeing the wheel, and it's pretty clear what he saw. And I've looked at pictures. I've never seen them in person, you know, on some of these Aztec ruins and some of the Egyptian ruins. And it's clear that they've seen something. And you look at Dark Ages paintings and things like that, and there's clearly a saucer in some of those. That's clearly what we would consider a modern day UFO. And I believe the government knows, somebody does, what's out there. And I believe the American public deserves to know. And I encourage you all, and thank you so much, MUFON, for the great work y'all do. And you keep asking these questions and keep urging your representatives in Washington to push for honesty and transparency. If we could have pushed a little harder, I believe those hearings, we could have shown the frustration. And if you're frustrated and you light up the phone lines and the emails to your elected officials, they understand it, especially in Congress, because we run every 2 years, and you all elect us. And we need to start exerting some of that muscle that we're granted by the Constitution. And people in Washington need to be pushed to do something productive. They need to hear what's on our minds, and we need to get some answers. And I appreciate y'all allowing me to be here, and I'll answer any questions. Sorry I went on so long. I apologize, but this issue is I'm ticked off about this issue. So please, any questions?
Tim, sorry I don't have a video for you to see a room full of very happy people that wish they were hearing what you're saying from more of our politicians.
Yes, sir.
When I was in Washington and we met at your office, we talked about the fact that some of our front-facing people that are addressing this topic, guys like Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo, are very big at talking about how we, the people, are the government, and if we don't like what we're seeing, we have the ability to change it. But do you see any evidence that that's true, or even more, that there's any kind of political will on a mass scale within Congress to really push for the truth and relentlessly, or is it just more lip service that's coming across the airwaves?
I think Washington is grossly corrupt. You know, people come to Washington and they pick and choose what they need to clean up, and to me it's like a trash can, brother. need to turn that thing upside down and put a garden hose to it. And there's a way to get to people in Washington. It's not by threatening, but it is by contacting them. And don't contact folks that aren't in your district. Everybody has 2 U.S. senators and 1 congressperson. And I think it's a good idea to contact them on this issue, because I'll guarantee the majority of them aren't paying this issue any attention. And of the ones that are, they're going to be like the one that came up to me and said, this is, we got much more important things to deal with. And nothing is more important than answering questions of our constituents and our concerns. So, and I gotta think we can change this, because if I didn't think that, I wouldn't be in Congress. Because in what world, y'all are hearing me now, it took me 6 years to get out of college, and I didn't drink or smoke pot. I'm no Phi Beta Kappa. As I like to say, I'm the 435th most powerful member of Congress, but I think there's 430 now. I think the Lord and the FBI have taken a few more out. But I do, I can't not lose. I think God has given us an incredible gift in this country, and if we're not careful, we're going to blow it. So I would hope that you all get to the polls and make some changes. I really do.
So we have some time for, how much longer you want to stay, Tim? I have a whole room full of people who would love to ask you a question.
You go as long as you want, brother. I fed my dogs, and like I said, my wife and daughter are at a horse show up in Georgia, and I'm sitting here drinking a Coca-Cola, listening to y'all. Just don't ask me to stand up, because I got short pants on and I'm with my coat and tie.
So who wants to ask a question? We've got limited space. Okay, so this is Joe Bookman. He's actually a very good friend of mine. He's very involved in the Libertarian Party at one time. And Joe,
Yes.
convey your question to me, and I'll pass it along.
I'm just wondering what he's
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So Tim, in the halls of Congress, at the water cooler, in the office buildings, is there chatter among the people that are actually privy to the classified hearings? Is there a buzz about it? Is there anything that's being kind of whispered around?
A very little, because I think the ones in there don't know the questions to ask. And if y'all want to, you can petition Kevin McCarthy about putting me on the Intelligence Committee, because dadgum, I'll ask those questions. Because I was very disappointed in the questions that were asked. Honestly, I get a lot of my information from people that see me on the news and will call me, and maybe they'll come by the house, maybe they'll meet me outside the halls of Congress and will tell me things that I need to know. I've met with people. It's funny, I've met with some folks, and I was meeting with a couple of guys, and they introduced themselves, and I said, "Who's he?" And there was a third guy there, and he said, "He's not here." And I said, "Okay, I get it." So I think there's people within government that want to talk, but we've got to get them, we got to subpoena them and allow them to be, not to be penalized for talking. And I think too, that's why I think a lot of it has gotten into industry, or it's put in industry, because it's not FOIA-able. It's not Freedom of Information Act. They can't use that to get to it, because you can't FOIA a private corporation like you can government. And so I think that's where a lot of it is. The information, I think the craft, if there is crafts, which I think there is, there's crash, there's recovery, and I think that's where it's at. It's the reverse engineering. You've heard all that before. I just don't think it's a government entity doing it. I've talked to some pilots who've told me they think it's skunk works, and everybody knows what that is, the private stuff. The secret government stuff. And I asked them, I said, "How many people do you think it would take to reverse engineer a craft?" And they said it would probably take 100 to 200 people. And inside I said, that's just not possible. That's just not possible. You couldn't get 200 people to 100 people. They say the way you keep it secret with 2 people is kill the other person. And so I just don't. I think they've recovered something, and I think the institutional knowledge of a lot of it has died off because of the people that knew it died, and then the ones that follow don't know the questions to ask and don't know which stones to turn over. Sorry, I answered too long. I'll quit answering such long answers, but that's from my discussions with my colleagues and others.
Well, MUFON's had a lot of luck in D.C. having meetings with a lot of people in your position and on the committees. And one of the things that I could tell the audience is that it's no longer a question of these guys don't know who to ask and what to look for. We've named names. We've told them about programs. We've given them information that they can follow up on. We've told them, hey, these are the people you should be subpoenaing for these hearings. And we're making real progress, and it's amazing. And the openness of guys like you is just really helping for us to get in there and have a voice and a seat at the table in an unprecedented manner.
Well, I appreciate that. I hesitated not to talk even about it, about my belief in what's going on, because I could get shut out. But I was hoping if I did, my belief is that somebody's going to come forward, and people have. And one thing you have to be careful of, though, is and I serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee, so everything going on with Ukraine and Afghanistan and all the hot spots all over the world, if you're called into a classified meeting, or if you're asked, if you want to go to a classified briefing, and it's in the skiff, so you can't take your cell phone, you don't take your Apple Watch, which I don't have, but and if you're briefed on that, then you're not allowed to talk about it. You're not allowed to talk about it. So I try not to go to too many of those briefings, because if it's something I already know and I'm briefed on it, then technically I can't talk about it. And so I think that's a way the power structure quite shuts us down. So we don't publicly talk about it. We might leak that information. I don't. Some of my colleagues do. Because I remember when I first got to Congress, I went to my first classified briefing, and I realized, I use this term a lot, but we were getting hosed. And I leaned over to one of my Democrat colleagues. I said, let me get this straight. If I miss this meeting, I could probably catch it on CNN in about 30 minutes. And he said, that's about right.
So you kind of alluded to this earlier, but do you really think that as we the people, if we made enough noise in the phones and the mails to our local representatives, that we could actually have an effect on moving hearings forward and what kind of hearings we have?
I do. I 100% do. But there again, it might push us, we got to worry. I worry too about the false information of the going down the rabbit hole. And everybody's going to say, Burchett, you're a conspiracy theorist. Well, I think it's a fact that you will be told things that are in fact error. So you will going after this different direction. And I think they'll do that to embarrass folks like me. I've been very cautious about it. I've had phone calls from people that claim that they have dug up aliens and things like that. I told somebody, I said, I don't want to end up in a freezer in North Carolina somewhere. But because they want you to come visit them out someplace, and also I worry about if you get too close to it, and I'm afraid, and that's one thing I've thought about is they try to wreck my political career, and my opposition is already using this against me, and but I don't really care. I was on what got me before you all. The genesis of all this was I was asked by TMZ, that great news network, which actually has some pretty good stuff on it. They caught me on the corner, and the guy always grabs me because he knows I'll tell him what I think, and I just call Washington corrupt, both parties. The whole thing is a sham, and he loves it, and he loves me. And so he asked me about UFOs, and I said, more people believe in UFOs than believe in Congress. And that's what started it all with me on with you all, kind of got me on track. And then I ended up printing shirts, and I sell them on my campaign website. I see people walking down the street. They don't even like Tim Burchett, but they love the dadgum T-shirt. It says that. So anyway, sorry, I'm talking too much. Go ahead, next question.
So we have time for maybe two more. Anybody want to ask a question? Come on up. You'll have to ask me, and I'll ask him. So Tim, you told me that you've been a fan of the of this study for a long time. Have you ever seen anything, a UFO or anything that you remember?
Yeah, well, I thought I did, but then on further analysis, I realized it wasn't. I was with a couple of my buddies, one of them who's dead now. We were in, I guess about 7th grade, and we were sleeping on top of, it was a water tower back behind his house at night. And we woke up, and there was this ring in the sky that was going away from us, and it was lit up, and it would light up and go down, light up, and then I realized later that in fact that was the airport is it's not far from where we live, and that was in fact some Air Force jets. I believe it's the afterburners, but I have not. No, I have not. But I have in my possession some incredible photos that were given to me by a former pilot who since passed away. It was like a deathbed confession that he gave it to his brother's family, and they saw me on the hearing sitting in the back there, and they called me and said they wanted to share those with me, and I have those in my possession, and I believe them to be very accurate. And it's just I haven't seen oxygen, but that doesn't mean I'm going to quit breathing. And I do believe, and I believe, I don't know if Billy Graham said it or not, but I always say he did. But if he didn't, it's Tim Burchett saying it. If you think we're the best God can do, then you don't hold God in very high esteem. There's a lot more out there, brother. Just a lot more out there.
Hey, so Tim, I don't want to put you on the spot in front of a couple hundred people, but
it's all right.
You did say you'd send me a couple of those so our MUFON guys could take a look at them. Are you just going to do that?
Yeah, I'll do that. Just remind me.
I'll send you an email. Does anybody else have another question? Okay, this is a friend of mine, Jordan.
In terms of contacting our local representatives, how do you imagine that we can most effectively, what are we to ask for in terms of what...
Okay. That's a great question, brother. Everybody has a, we don't do 1-800 numbers anymore because everybody's got a dadgum cell phone. It's a 202 number, and you can call your elected representatives. And what I would suggest is send an email, a phone call, and maybe even a handwritten letter, and nothing more than a paragraph. Just say who you are. I live in your district, and I'm very concerned about this issue, and I would like to see hearings on this subject. And if you would like to further talk to me about it, please call me. And don't be threatening. They'll know what you mean. And anybody that threatens me, generally, you don't get the same response. I mean, I've got death threats all the time. I spent $30,000 on security in and around my farm with motion detectors because of death threats. But I take that stuff very serious. So don't get no threatening. You don't want the FBI knocking on your dadgum door any more than you are on the list for being at this hearing, and I'm probably on their list for speaking to you. And I'm not kidding about that either. I'm being totally serious. But and say I'm very concerned about this issue. These are some questions I'd like to ask, and if you'd like to further talk, please call me. And what they'll do is, a couple of weeks later, you'll get a call from a staff member, probably. I try to call back all mine, but on a hot issue, I can get a couple hundred, and it's tough. The issue's already gone by the time I can get them called back. But generally, you leave a phone number, an email address, you'll get a form letter, probably. But if you keep inquiring about it, eventually you'll get a live human. And just tell them you're interested in these hearings and that we need to get to the bottom of it. And maybe say something in there. We've had It's been reported. I get the number. You can Google it. I'm sure the folks at MUFON have the testimony somewhere where they said how many close, not close encounters, but close. Our aircraft were close to whatever these are, 14 times or something, and that should alarm somebody. That we've got multi-million-dollar aircraft, that something's flying around it that we don't have control over.
One thing, I was really amazed, and I would share with everybody and all the people that are watching the live stream, your representatives are way more accessible than you might think. You really can call them on the phone, and they really will call you back, and you really can get a word in. And after going to your office and meeting your staff and seeing how all of that works and the communication that we had and the quality of communication, I can say it's not that hard to reach out and engage our representatives. And they all want to get reelected. If enough of us in these districts are making these calls, then they're going to pay attention to the topic.
Absolutely, 100%. And I just think if the number of people, it's over half the country believes there's something going on up there, and so if you could just get a slice of that, and you'd be surprised, and focus on the people. If you check these committees, if they're on the intelligence committee, check see if your legislator is on the intelligence committee, and because they are, you really need to target those folks. But I know them all, and so I'm gonna, they know where I'm at. But if other members start saying, "Hey, what's going on with this? I got these crazy people back home wanting to know about UFOs," and you'd be surprised. I'm on an airplane, walking through first class, and some guy in A1, the first spot there, he says, he looks up and goes, "Congressman Burchett." I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Hey, I just want to thank you for looking into this UAP issue." And I said, "Wow, thanks." And then, these folks that sent me these pictures that I find very incredible. But I just think, let's turn up the heat, folks. Let's turn up the dadgum heat, and let's get some answers.
Is there one more question we have time for?
Sure.
Did you hear that, Tim?
I'm on Foreign Affairs Committee. What can we do to get these other countries to
because a lot of other countries have files on this stuff. Brazil just did hearings, and we know that Russia has extensive files. Is there any kind of cooperation or air of cooperation trying to get an international consensus?
Yeah, Foreign Affairs would be the right avenue to go there. It's just getting our chairman to quit to inquire about that, and I'll push that a little bit on my side, see what I can do, if I can get any movement at all.
Understandably, they have their hands full right now, but that's a great answer. Thank you.
And you should know how you get on the A committees. You have to. Both parties do this. This tells you the level that I don't like about Washington, and it's the dirty little secret. But to move up to the A committees, you have to raise so much money for your caucus. The Democrats and the Republicans do that. They both issue a bill, and that's how you move up in the committee structure. It's not the best player. I tell people I'm from Tennessee, and Peyton Manning would still be waiting to get in if he was in Washington. Because they're not putting the best players in. It's who can raise the most money and who can kiss the most butt. And I'm not very good at doing either one. So, for lack of a better word, I hope that gets in the press.
So I did just get a question about, can you just use your phone and hold those photos up right now? But I understand you're talking on your phone, so I kind of got your back on that one. There'll be a time and a place for that.
Yeah, I'll get them to you. You can. I'm trying to get somebody to analyze them to tell me. They're old Polaroids, so they're late 60s, and I'm trying to get them analyzed right now.
Yeah, you know, we got one of the best guys in the business that does that too. So,
do you?
Yeah. Did you get my email that I sent? I'll follow up with
not.
you later. So,
I'll go back. Send it again. And
I will.
I'll check.
It'll come from media@mufon.com, and I'll CC your other one.
Hey, you didn't send it to the.
I sent it to the one you
didn't?
wrote on the back of your business card.
Okay, good. Okay, yeah.
And everybody,
I'll
that
dig
one
it up.
was, no, just kidding.
Okay, great. I'll get it. I'll get that then.
So, you know, we've got this film coming up, MUFON Studios and Ron James Television and 1091, and you're going to be in it. Are you looking forward to the release of Accidental Truth in Thanksgiving?
I am. I'm in negotiations with Matthew McConaughey playing Tim Burchett in the Tim Burchett story. So
Yes.
I understand he can't even walk the streets of Texas anymore because they say, "Hey, are you Tim Burchett?" And he goes, "No, I'm Matthew McConaughey." And they go, "Oh, okay." And they just, well, no big deal.
But you know, once Hollywood gets a hold of it, you'll be like abducted by UFOs at the Capitol building.
Yeah,
it'll get out
I'll
of
tell you
hand.
what, my biggest fear, honestly, is them trying to destroy me when I get too close. When I get too close, you know, I'll end up committing suicide by shooting myself in the back of the head 4 times or something, and a true Washington style, or they'll set me up with a bag of dope or something stupid like that. And you know, I mean, this town will destroys people for a lot less than this. So you know, I fully am aware that I will be getting calls periodically from folks wanting to know what I know, and so I'm, you know, I mean, I'm fully aware that the realization there, but I'm sick of this. I'm sick of our government not being transparent. And that's another thing. You can press our media more on that, the transparency issue. They're going to laugh about, oh, little green man, all this other stuff. But transparency is what, and we need more of it in government, and our media needs to step up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. You've been very generous with your time.
Thank you.
And you've got constituents here in the room. Shout out from your friend Tom Reed, who says he knows you. There's people in your district that care about this and want to see you get reelected. You've got some support, and they're going to turn out for you.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate MUFON. Thank y'all for keeping the heat on us. We need it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Tim Burchett here for MUFON.